Welcome back. Despite 7 years of occupation in Afghanistan and global war on terror, which promised to smoke out Al-Qaeda's terrorists out of their caves and hunt them down, Osama bin Laden is still free. But does it really matter? Would the killing or capture of the world's most wanted men in Afghanistan put an end to Al-Qaeda's international network? Some believe it's already too late. The genie is out of the bottle. They reckon today's Al-Qaeda is a highly fragmented, decentralized global network linked by common ideology. Stephen Cole has this report.
When the World Trade Center was destroyed, Osama bin Laden claimed a divine victory. Al-Qaeda's most audacious attack inspired jihadis around the world to carry out their own acts of terror. Each one of these attacks was claimed by or committed in the name of Al-Qaeda. But this was a new kind of leaderless campaign. In Madrid, Al-Qaeda knew nothing about the bombing until afterwards, when they claimed it as a success for the organization. Today's terrorists can fund, coordinate, and carry out the attacks, not even knowing whether Al-Qaeda Central will approve their actions until after the corpses have been counted.
After 11th of September, Al-Qaeda is not a pyramid-built organization as it used to be in Tora Bora. Now it is a flat, loose organization with franchises, branches all over the world. We have Al-Qaeda now in Iraq, Al-Qaeda regrouping again in Afghanistan and Pakistan, Al-Qaeda in North Africa, Al-Qaeda in Europe, Al-Qaeda in Somalia, and we don't know where the next branch will be opened.
Al-Qaeda is a powerful global brand with a powerful global message. Bring down those who attack Islam. Destroy America and its Crusader alliance. The message no longer has to be forged, though, through harsh jihadi boot camps in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Today, its ideology is disseminated through a whole range of new media.
Your democratically elected governments continuously perpetuate atrocities against my people all over the world.
Mohammed Sadiq Khan was one of the London suicide bombers. His video was produced by Al-Qaeda's own in-house media department. Churns out dark propaganda in slickly produced videos, literature, and websites.
So now Al-Qaeda is more independent. They put their material on the internet, and millions of people in the world can watch it. And if the American intelligence service managed to close down one site, 10 sprang. So it is like a mouse and cat game.
Al-Qaeda thrives on the World Wide Web. Easy-to-access internet sites give terrorist tips, engage in ideological debate, and enlist wannabe jihadis from the relative safety of cyberspace. This organization that claims to be founded on ancient Islamic principles has ruthlessly exploited 21st century public relations and spin. Al-Qaeda can now present itself to the world. Its deputy leader and master propagandist, Ayman al-Zawahiri, now broadcasts in English.
The modern-day crusaders in the White House and are working to destabilize this nuclear-capable nation.
He's preaching to an international audience. Today's terrorists are hard to spot. They're not all young, frustrated religious fanatics. Most are educated. Many are married. Some are not even devout Muslims. In other words, they don't fit a profile. And this is what scares intelligence agencies.
It's like a Hydra monster. It's once you cut one head, 5 sprang.
If the most up-to-date weaponry won't stop the new Al-Qaeda, then who or what will?
To discuss the global reality of Al-Qaeda, the global and local influence of Al-Qaeda, I would like to start with you, Mr. Shower, in Washington. The way America thinks about Al-Qaeda 7 years later can be summarized in the theses of two scholars, one called Mark Sageman, who thinks this has become a leaderless organization, that it doesn't matter if you take on Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan or not, that the genie is out of the bottle.
There's nothing that goes on in the world that exists without leadership. Al-Qaeda provides a leadership that's inspirational and instigational, if you will, and that certainly has been its main goal as an organization since it was formed in 1988. And for the United States, Al-Qaeda remains the one organization in that group of Islamist organizations that can attack within the continental United States, and probably will before the next year or two is out.
The idea that this is a hierarchical organization, I think, is very misguided. And we see
so you can't be like a card-carrying member of Al-Qaeda?
No, because if you look at the details of these plots, you know, in the case of the Paris embassy bombing plot, certainly they were anointed or blessed for the operation. They clearly got money, although not very much money. Came up through Morocco, through Spain, the usual route, went up to Paris. But there is a tremendous amount of autonomy, number one. Number two, Al-Qaeda is protean. And by that I mean that and it's why they're so hard to track in Europe, that once they form a cell or a group, and usually they begin in a mosque, the mosque is not radical enough for this. I'm using an exact case of Lyon. They go and form their own sort of worship center in a small apartment, usually 7 or 8 guys. They carry out or attempt to carry out an action, and then the cell dissipates, unlike traditional cells, which makes Al-Qaeda very effective. But to describe it as a hierarchical or lineal organization is to completely misunderstand.
Mr. Shower, I would like you to take a point on board. So why should we trust the strategists when they're the ones who begin and end the discussion?
Well, you've never really discussed the cause of the war that we're involved in. First of all, let me say that I don't think Al-Qaeda commands and controls virtually anything outside of Al-Qaeda. And Al-Qaeda remains an effective organization that threatens to the United States. That's the first point. If you think that al-Zawahiri and bin Laden can't communicate with the forces of Al-Qaeda Central, you haven't walked into a Radio Shack or any other kind of place that sells electronic equipment. And the idea that every time they use the phone, a drone gets them is wrong. The problem for all of us. No, the problem for all of us is that the cause of this war is
what about
U.S.
those young
foreign
Muslims
policy.
in Europe or young cells in the Maghreb? Do these?
I don't think they have any relation to Al-Qaeda Central.
May I add just to...
Go ahead, Mr. Shower.
No, let me finish here for a moment.
Yes.
The problem for the world, the problem for the United States, is the animosity in the Muslim world, whether it's Al-Qaeda or any of the other groups affiliated or not affiliated with it, is the impact of U.S. foreign policy. Until that policy changes, the threat to the United States is going to continue to grow. Until we do something about the Saudi relationship and stop using so much oil, until we dump the Israelis and do something in our own interest rather than in Israeli interests, all of this talk is really irrelevant because the war is only going to get worse.
So what you're arguing then that America is basically reaping what it sows around the world, and so as
without question, sir.
And so as international public opinion is infuriated because of the American policies, young extremists are springing here and there without relationship to Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan?
Well, certainly what Al-Qaeda has been able to do is to focus the Muslim world on U.S. foreign policy. And that's the animosity that's in the Muslim world toward us. I don't think Americans are hated because they're Americans. They're hated not because of who we are, but because of what we do. And until we get a grasp on that, we in America, the threat to America will continue to grow, and with it, the threat to our allies.
Professor, they don't attack America for what America stands for, but for America does around the world.
In the last 7 years, the foreign policy, the policy of the United States of America, the greatest power in the world, the central key policy issue of the United States has been the war on terror against Al-Qaeda. And here again, the second point is that the United States not only is looking at Al-Qaeda in terms of Osama bin Laden and Ayman Zawahiri and his associates, lumping all Islamists, whether it's Hamas or whether it's Hezbollah, and they become Islamofascist. And then, of course, if you lump Osama bin Laden, Ayman Zawahiri with Hamas and Hezbollah, and you say this is a grave threat, then surely you have a long war. Surely you have a global war, and those same policies spread social and political chaos and fuel extremism and anti-American sentiments.
Chris, well, so it seems that there are young people here and there, not only in the Muslim world, but also in the Western world. A lot of them, of course, come from Islamic or Muslim background, and they would carry the mantle of Al-Qaeda, but there's absolutely no relationship at all.
Having spent 7 years in the Middle East and having had frequent contact with Hamas and Hezbollah and all of these groups, is that these are groups that have often more antagonisms between them than they have shared goals.
And they have antagonism towards Al-Qaeda.
Well, yes, and you know, when I covered the Islamists in Egypt, they couldn't stand the Algerian Islamists.
So lump-summing them together is counterproductive.
This is like talking about communists, as if Yugoslav communists are the same as Romanian communists or the same as Czech communists. And unfortunately, the people running the show, you know, we talked earlier about the people running foreign policy, and Mr. Durrani, General Durrani talked that, you know, there may be a strategy. I'm afraid they are as dumb as they look. The fact is they are culturally, linguistically, historically, socially illiterate.
Chris,
they don't understand the very societies, and they can speak only and exclusively in the language of violence.
2 points on, I want to just...
Professor, we're going to continue this discussion after the break. Before I'll let Mr. Shower go, I need to ask all three of you one simple question. Would it make any difference if Osama bin Laden is caught today or not, before the elections?
No.
Professor Georges?
Yes.
Michael Shower, do you think it's going to make any difference in the war against Al-Qaeda whether bin Laden is caught, captured, or killed?
Yes, he's very clearly a great man. He's certainly, for the United States, he's affected our history more than any other single individual negatively in the last 50 years. Well, he needs to be dead.
Thank you, Mr. Shower, for being with us, and we'll be right back after the break.